Wilburn Hargis Giles. I was born August 5th, 1933 in San Marcos, Texas. My parents are Enola Hollins Hurd and Lawrence Charles. Everybody called him L.C. Hargis.
Okay. Brothers and sisters?
No, I'm an only child.
Okay.
A very small brat.
Very small brat.
Yes, I am. And my grandfather, Mose Hollins, he would not work in anybody's field. He would tell them. His house is still standing behind the big house there in Staples. They have it sealed up now, but anytime I want to go there, they lived on the Loman farm. And he always worked in the gin. And they said that he could pick up a whole bale of cotton and take on his back. He was one strong man. And he loved to raise hogs. And they let him keep hogs, and they still got some old hog pens that he built. And they let him keep his hogs there.
I see.
Yeah, always fun.
Always fun.
Always fun. We always had plenty of food to eat. My grandfather started driving a grocery truck, Southern Grocery, in 1918. And we just always had plenty. Always had plenty.
Southern Grocery was a San Marcos company.
Uh-huh.
And some of their coffee tins.
Yeah, and my grandfather worked for them. And on some of the coffee bags, they named it Old Mo's Coffee.
Yes.
And that's my grandfather. And they have him, a picture of him on the and the bags.
I've never seen one of those.
I have one of the bags, and where his picture's on there drinking coffee.
Southern Grocery.
And he delivered groceries in San Marcos, Lockhart, Seguin, Austin, just all around. And so then when I was 5, I went to school at the colored school.
And this uncle that was a teacher was Edward?
Edward Hollins, And I started to school at 5, and they looked at me and I said, well, I'm 5 at home and 6 at school. And I could do the work, so they let me stay.
Right.
And then a little boy there, my uncle been teach over in the high school part, and I was over in the elementary part. And the teacher said, asked the question, what's an island? And so the little boy behind me said, island is a bucket of water. I raised my little hand up, and I stood up. I said, island is a bucket of water. And the teacher said, no, Ollie, an island is not a bucket of water. And she tried to explain. She said, what's an island? An island is a bucket of water. She said, go get Mr. Hollins. They went and got my uncle, and my uncle came in. And she asked me again. My uncle used to call me Sweets. He said, now Sweets, an island, I never will forget what an island is. An island is a body of land surrounded by water. Now, what's an island? An island is a bucket of water. And he spanked me in front of the whole class. He said, now young lady, what's an island? An island is a body of land surrounded by water. So I never will forget it. And I went home and told Mama, baby spanked me, that's what we call him, baby. Baby spanked me in front of the whole class. And she really fussed at him. He better not never spank me like that anymore. So.
Yeah, in front of everybody. 30.
Oh, it was more than that. This neighborhood was just really, had lots of children. You know, we had 4 Negro schools here.
Is that right?
This is not the only school.
Where were the others?
One was at Yard Creek out near the shopping mall. And I've got a copy of the old deeds saying that that was to be a school for the little Negro and colored children.
I know where that site is. It's
And-
across from the power plant, right?
And that's they had me investigating that power plant. And I called his sister and asked her, what did he mean, Negro and colored children? And the Negro children were the darker skinned, and the colored children were the light skinned.
I see.
And then we had another school on Hunter Road.
Okay.
Miss Harris used to be the teacher there.
Okay, down in Old Stringtown?
Uh-huh. And then we had another school over where we called Katytown because my grandmother them lived in Katytown for a while. It's over there where,
By the Katy Depot?
it's over in that area that they called Katytown.
Okay.
And we had a school there. And then the school on Comel Street, the preacher was the teacher. And then they decided they're gonna move, they built the Whites a new school. And they moved the old building down. Center Street was not open all the way. And that old school sit on Fredericksburg, and between that church and between that old First Baptist church.
I see.
And that's where they went to school, and they had to build desks and all of that stuff in there. And then it was the Pitts family. They had a school on Hunter Road also.
Yeah.
And they used to teach, the classes were integrated then.
Really?
Because they used to teach the little Negro children, the little Caucasian children.
All together.
And, in that area. My grandmother had a restaurant on Center Street.
And which grandmother? This your mother?
That's my mother's mother. That's who I live with most of the time.
Okay.
And she had a restaurant because they could have the ministerial shows here and everything, and they would have conferences.
Minstrels.
But
Minstrels, yeah.
And they would have they could perform downtown, but they could not eat in the restaurants. So they would come to my grandmother's restaurant and eat.
I see.
And Sister Brown, we called her Sister Brown, they were in a 2-story house, and Sister Brown made up beds upstairs for them to have a place to sleep. It's kind of like a little hotel-like.
I see.
And they would eat at my grandmother's restaurant.
And you
She had her own home laundry, and that was after we moved to Valley Street, and I'm still on Valley Street.
Okay.
But anyway, she had this little home laundry, and she hired 3 women, and that's how much laundry she had.
I see.
And the people would bring the clothes and drop them off, and Fridays they would come and pick them up. We had the Negro churches were the foundation of entertainment because it was so much in churches then. We all had our church. We belonged to Wesley, African Methodist Church, AME, Methodist Episcopal. And it was just always something going on, always something going on for children. And downtown, anyway, on Sundays, it was closed. All the stores closed on Sundays downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't anywhere to go, and we'd go to church, and then Mama would invite the preacher for dinner, and then we'd go out and play. We couldn't stay in the house. Yes, and food. Oh, my grandmother was always in the kitchen baking, and we would. And every Christmas, Mama would, old Mexican woman taught her how to make tamales. And every Christmas, Miss Etta's making tamales, and people from the compress, they would hear about it, and she would sell tamales. And we'd all sit around the old dining room table, rolling tamales, rolling tamales.
It's really labor intensive.
Yes, and she would buy the hog head, and she would split it open. She'd take an axe and split the head open, and she'd take the brains out, and then she'd cook the head, and she'd fry the brains with eggs. We had, ooh, no brains, they didn't look good.
Some menudo?
Now, we ate mostly chitlins.
Okay, chitlins.
You ever had any chitlins?
I've never had chitlins. You got me. I've had menudo, but not chitlins.
Oh, you would love chitlins.
Well,
Uh-huh.
That was still
That was the
operating
gin.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mr. Heavy used to work over at Gin. Everybody called him Mr. Heavy because he was a big African-American man.
Yeah.
Man loved to eat, and if he heard Miss Etta was selling chicken dinners or something, he would come over there. We'd have to deliver a dinner to Mr. Heavy. And when I was in California, my grandmother wrote us a letter. Mr. Heavy was killed because the compress caught fire, and he was too big to get out the window.
Oh my God.
So he was
That's
killed at the
Oh
compress.
my God.
Yeah, but Mr. Heavy, we always remember Mr. Heavy. And we used to go to Holt's Grocery. My grandmother would send us to Holt's Grocery Store.
How do you spell that?
Holt's
Holt.
Grocery.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
H-O-L-T.
yeah, I speak Ebonics.
No, I got
Holt's.
you. Yeah, I'm with you.
And we would go to, and Mama would get flour or something that she needed. Mr. Walter, you gonna give us a P-loan? And he would he say, sure, you know I'm gonna give you a P-loan.
Walter Feldman.
Not Walter Holt.
Walter Holt, I apologize.
Yeah, he would give us a P-loan, a piece of candy or something.
Absolutely.
And then he moved us over in Katyville, because we used to walk over there to Katyville to the store. And Miss Ollie had a store on Center Street. She's African American, and she had a grocery store.
So it was obviously a thriving community.
Oh
within the
yes,
community.
oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Miss Ollie's grocery store and Cutting John, Broadnax, Cutting John. And he had a little stand in the alley there. When you go down Valley Street, he had a little stand where he sold soda water and cookies and stuff like that. And yeah, we'd go down to Cutting John's and get something. And just everybody had little glacé stands. You ever had glacé? They call it snow cones now.
Okay.
But it used to be glacé. And we always had fun. The little Hispanic children, we all lived in the same neighborhood. We fight together, we get out and roll tires together, and then we love each other. Yeah, and I don't know, we were just always good neighbors. We were just always good neighbors. I don't know, seemed like here in San Marcos, we all got along. We all, Jack Gary was the sheriff, Mr. Wren, and all of that. When Jack Gary come in to pick up his laundry, Mama knew to have his hoe cakes ready. Well, yeah, and he would come through and she would have his hoe cakes on the kitchen table with his molasses. And he would come through high at her, keep right on to the kitchen, sit down at the table and eat his whole cake and sop and serve, sopping molasses. And he would eat and then he'd get up and pay Mama and take his laundry and go on.
Probably 3 people in the room are going to laugh when I ask the question, what is a hoe cake?
A hoe cake is like
One.
biscuit bread.
Okay.
They call it biscuit bread. And they would pat it out and they would fry it. It's just fried biscuits.
Okay.
Yeah, and they call that hoe cakes. My mother and dad separated when I was about a year or something like that, because Daddy, last time I saw my father, he came by the school to see me and he left me a dime. He said, Daddy is leaving, and but I'll be back someday. And I just wanted to tell you bye. And I went home and told my grandmother that Daddy came by the school, left me a dime. Mama said, I wished I had seen him and I'd give it back to him. You don't need it. So Mother met this young man there because she was back home then and she was cooking at Gary. And she met this young man and they married, and he wanted to move to California.
Military man?
He wasn't. He just worked at Gary.
Okay.
He thought he was going to be military.
So y'all moved to California?
We moved to California, to the Bay Area, and I was 8 years old. We drove all the way to California.
My gosh.
And then when we got there, now I just left Texas. This was kind of I don't know what you would call it, the way I felt. because here I was used to a segregated school, all colored teachers, colored students and everything. And the neighborhood that we moved in California, the school that I had to go to, because I was in the, they call it low and high out there. And the school that I went to, I'm the only little colored girl in the whole school. And I look around, all these white teachers and all these white children. Lord, what's all these white folks gonna do to me? And they opened their arms and hugged me, and I realized then and there, we're no different. Yeah. We're all the same. And that's where I grew up. I came back to Texas, hey, and I get hugs from everybody.
And you still do?
I mean, I don't look at the color of a person's skin, I look at the person.
Look at the,
I was still in high school,
Okay.
and he came to California and stayed with my mother's and stepfather's friends. And all the little high school girls were just looking at him. And I thought, I'm gonna get that man.
What was his name?
Frederick Marcellus Giles.
Okay.
And so then, and when I finished school and everything, well, right away, you know, we noticed each other because we were living in the same apartment building. Then we had moved, and I had to go to Albany High because we lived in Berkeley, but just across the little creek there, we were in Albany, and I had to go to Albany High.
Okay.
And so then we married, and we had a good life together. He was so sweet. I never find another husband like him. But the man kept me barefooted and pregnant. I tell you, every time you look up, it seemed like I was pregnant.
5 children, do I understand?
Yeah, but I had, okay, my first 2 were 10 months apart. And then I had a miscarriage. And then I had another one that's supposed to have been a twin, and one was born dead. And then I had 1, 2, 3 more miscarriages. Then I had some more. And I said, and I say, if this is all it is to married life, I don't want to be married no more. and then my mother, but you know, we were happy, and it used to be earthquakes. We got caught in a few. And so then my mother and my stepfather got sick, because my stepfather didn't want us to marry. He didn't want him around or anything. And so, and then when he got sick, he got real sick, and he wanted to come back to Texas.
Okay.
And I stayed on in California with my husband.
Okay.
And then my grandfather died, and I couldn't get to Texas to his funeral because I was pregnant again. And the doctor advised me not to travel. And so I missed that. And my grandmother had 2 sisters. They lived in California. And they bought a home in Oakland. And they had fixed it where my husband and I and the children could move in with them. And my aunties always said, because not either one of them had children, they were married, never had children, they said those children never want for anything. And they just kept my babies clothed, and just, we always had plenty. And
but you finally came back to San Marcos.
I came back because when I got pregnant that last time, I thought, I don't want no more babies. And you know, it got so well, in every married life, you know, you have arguments and everything. I guess so I didn't want him to touch me or anything. And so it was just best, and I wanted to go home. And my grandmother said, well, if that's what that, like I said, I'm a spoiled brat. Because I would say, you know, I want to do this. No, sweetheart, we can't do it. But I want to. No, sweetheart. And I want this. Baby, we can't afford it. I want it. And one day I told him, I said, I want to go to the show. It's a good movie on. I want to go see it. And he was tired because I didn't work. And he was tired, and I went to the beauty shop and got my hair fixed all pretty. I want to go to the show. sweetheart, not today. I don't want to go. I'm tired. And so we were washing diapers. We had to rub them out on the rub board. He would come home and he would rub them on the rub board, and I would rinse them. So he didn't want to go to the show, and I took one of those wet diapers and slapped him across the face with it. And he didn't say anything. He walked, he dipped the diaper in some water, walked all the way around and came into our room and wrung that diaper out right on top of my head. Messed up my pretty hair. But we went to the show. And we had a meeting to talk about the teachers not having their jobs and everything.
The black teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we had a meeting, a town meeting, everybody. And one of these old Caucasian men, well, I don't want no Negro teaching my children. And so Miss Catherine Hardeman was sitting over there. Bless her heart, she got up and she stood over that man. What do you mean you don't want no Negro teaching your child? All your lives we've been teaching you. When your mom and daddy didn't have time to teach you, we taught you how to sit at the table, what spark to use and everything. We taught you everything you know, and now you don't want a Negro teaching your children. And he just sat back, turned red, and just looked up at her. And the teachers were in the grade then. But she sure did. I guess he thought I better shut my mouth. But that upset her.
Yeah.
And she started teaching in Buda. Because we wasn't routing or killing or anything, everything just went smooth.
Right.
Just smooth.
That's
And,
good. I'm glad to hear that.
and my children would come home, they didn't complain about anything. And they wanted to take Latrice up another grade, and her daddy said no, because she finished high school when she was 16. And she started to college, and she finished in 3 years. And so, no, it wasn't any problems. If it was, my children didn't say anything about it. And Michael was in California. I went to California to see him graduate. I married again to an older man, because by then I'd got my divorce. And then I married again to an older man, Dr. Bell.
Okay.
He was educated doctor, PhD, and everything, and I thought he had some money.
So you were wrong, I guess?
Oh, yes.
But
The
you
man-
had 2 more children.
I had twins,
Had twins.
and the man almost drove me
Oh
crazy.
my gosh.
Oh, the man almost drove me crazy. You're Dr. Bell's wife. And to dress like I'm dressed now, you're not supposed to be dressed like that.
Was
You're
he an
Dr.
MD
Bell's
or a
wife.
professor?
PhD.
PhD. Okay.
And we go to church. I started going to his church. And I sit with people my age. You're not supposed to sit over there with those common street people. You sit over here with some of those old retired teachers. That's prestige. And I had to drive his Cadillac because that's prestige. And you're Dr. Bell's wife. Ooh, it made me so, I felt like killing him. And
How long did that last, man?
it didn't last too long.
Okay.
I told him I wanted a divorce. You're not going to leave me in this big fine house. I said, when you met me, I wasn't living in a shack.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I left him and took all my furniture with me because this big fine house didn't have any furniture.
Okay. But you raised the 2 children.
Oh, yeah, my
Your
twins,
daughters.
they're 44 now.
Okay.
And then I married again.
I'm not sure I knew there was a third.
Oh, yeah, honey.
Sorry.
It was 3 of them.
And who was the third guy?
Nathaniel Pleasant.
Okay. Mr. Pleasant. Okay.
And
No
Lord,
children.
no, praise God, no children.
Okay.
I tried to kill him and tell God he died, but
Okay.
anyway, I separated and got my divorce from him, and I bought my first husband's name back.
I I see.
That's how I'm Giles
I
again.
see, okay.
So,
Well, you go to Durham down in San Antonio, right?
and
Get some
then
accounting?
after the third husband, that's when I went to Durham Business College because I worked in a fiberglass plant there in Seguin. And I was cooking in a restaurant because I was having trouble with my hands, and the doctor said I never would be able to cook anymore. But I had to get away from the second husband, so I started cooking in a restaurant again, and I cooked at night. So my oldest daughter would be there to watch the twins, because the twins stayed in the hospital for the longest. And when they were 3 weeks old, I called the doctor and asked him if I could go to work, and he said, yeah, don't do any lifting or anything. And that's when I started cooking in a restaurant, and I cooked at night so I could bring food home to my children, save every penny I could, because I was getting ready to leave this man. And so then after I cooked there for a while, I heard they were hiring at the fiberglass plant there in Seguin. So I went and applied for a job, and I was hired. And I went back and gave him 2 weeks notice, and I said, I'm gonna go to work at the fiberglass because the pay is better. You going to work at the fiberglass plant, they don't hire colored folks out there. I said, well, they hired me. Well, they'll probably give you the hardest, dirtiest job they got. And I said, no, they're going to train me to be an inspector. And he went and got the day cook and told me I could go home right then and there, because he didn't want me there anymore. And so I said, I can rest for 2 weeks. And then I went to work at the fiberglass plant, and I was an inspector of fiberglass. And for the longest, I was the only African-American there. And I kept asking them, y'all gonna hire any more African-Americans, any more Negroes? They said, yeah. And I stayed there 3 years, the San Marcos Baptist Academy. And I went to the Baptist Academy because I went around to different offices because I didn't have office experience. So how can we get experience if nobody hires? Right. And 2 days after I finished school, they got me a job at a CPA office in San Antonio. And I worked for that CPA office for a year. And I learned all I could about accounting and everything. And then when I applied again, I applied at the academy, and they hired me. And President Byram, he was the president then, Jack Byram, and he had to interview me. They said the president never interviewed anybody. But he interviewed me, and he said, do you realize that you're going to be the first, I know what he wanted to say, and to hold the position you're going to hold here at the academy? I said, yeah. You know, I don't have any problem with it. I'm here like everybody else, and as long as I qualify for the job, that's what's important. 23 years.
San Marcos Baptist.
I worked in that office. I've always belonged to different organizations within the city, and I was always down in the city raising hell with them. We need our streets paved. Right. That's the Dunbar neighborhood. Right. We need they named it, they stopped calling it Colored Town and started calling it Dunbar after they named the school. They had, and I'm gonna back up a minute. Okay. They had the school board, they had a Negro school board also. And they had to change the name from Colored School, and the Negroes submitted 3 names: Ola Lee Coleman, Boston Grant, and Paul Laurence Dunbar. They had to present it to the white school board
to make the decision.
And so they decided on Paul Laurence Dunbar, and that's where this Dunbar and the Dunbar neighborhood came about.
I see.
And I marched down there and got the streets paved and everything. And hey, once I walked in City Hall, because I was always down there with something. And one day I walked in there, getting on the city council meeting, I heard one of the city council, oh hell, Miss Giles is here. and so, but we got what we wanted. Yeah. And when they, Marshalls bought this building. The school board had it up for sale after integration. The Marshalls bought it, and I've got a copy of the deeds, and they wanted to, they dedicated it to the city to be used as a recreation center for the neighborhood, for everybody. And so the old Army barracks that they moved down to make an extra classroom because they need the classroom, and they moved Army barracks down here from Camp Swift. We used to have a meeting over there, and the city started storing a lot of junk in there. And I went to City Hall. Y'all gonna have to get that junk out of there. The Marshalls bought it for a recreation center. Let's fix it up. So they fixed it, and they put carpet in the floor and everything, and we start having meetings here and everything. And I get excited, and I start talking loud, and Rodney said, "Ollie, when you get up there, we have to turn the volume down." And so yes, and I've served on just about every board, Parks and Rec, the Cemetery Association, Human Service Advisory Board. I told him I'm gonna serve on something down there until I die. I'm gonna make sure City Hall stays straight. And